JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur inside the Gamecock. He joins the show. JC, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Always a pleasure. First things first, of course, as always, want to say thank you to you and Phil for having me on the show this morning, and very excited to chat with you once again, my friend. How are you?
Certainly, doing great. Just wrapped up a pretty good show there. Thanks for joining us as well, and excited to be back here talking with you on a Thursday. I think it's always better. I think when there's a game to look forward to when you're breaking this stuff down, and certainly after the open date last week, good to be back talking matchups and football and things like that heading into Saturday night.
Yeah, JC, and I was going to say the open week. Of course, it was a great time to take some time off to reflect, if you will. But I'm sure, like you, or like all of us, you were glued to the TV watching college football. So we'd love to just get your brief thoughts on what took place last weekend, especially that game in Knoxville, because obviously a lot of those results last weekend are results that, affect the Gamecocks. I thought there were some really interesting final results. You saw Florida lose to LSU. You saw Kentucky. They bounced back in a big way, beating Mississippi State. And then obviously the highlight of the weekend was that big game in Knoxville, Tennessee taking down Alabama. You're just overall, like I said, brief thoughts on what happened during the Gamecocks bye week.
Yeah, heck of a week of football. Heck of a week to have a bye week. I thought just
Right.
a lot of really good games down to the wire. Some surprising results. I didn't know if Tennessee had it in them to beat Bama, but I wasn't overly thrilled with Bama's approach to that one. I thought, heck, you got to keep Tennessee's offense off the field, right? So maybe line up and try to control the ball a little bit more. But they came out firing with Bryce Young. I don't know that Bama's the same as they've been at receiver. I think they're good. I don't know that they're that elite team at wide receiver anymore. Bryce Young's playing, I think, really well. And of course, the running back they got from Georgia Tech, Gibbs, is special. But it was interesting the way they came out and tried to attack. And, Alabama did battle back after being down 28-10 and made a game of it and had a chance to win, really, probably thinking they should have won. But, with what they do on offense at Tennessee, when you've got Hooker back there and he's in such a zone, Chris, accuracy-wise, I mean, he throws a gorgeous football. And it's right on the money. And when you've got guys like Hyatt and McCoy and Keaton and a lot of these guys that are have gotten a lot better during their careers at Tennessee, then you run the ball and play as fast as they do, you're going to win your share of games. I think defensively, it seems like they have a starter out every week at Tennessee. I think what they're doing is taking a lot of risks, and they don't care that they're doing it because it's like, well, if we give up a big long pass play here, who cares? We're going to get the ball back and score. That's kind of the mindset up there right now. So I think that jumped out. Utah beating USC or Southern Cal. Exciting game down to the wire. Kind of a cathartic win for Utah, I thought, and kind of spoils some anticipation in the Pac-12 with both Los Angeles schools being undefeated. I thought that was a good one. Was really surprised that Michigan boat raced Penn State like they did. We keep waiting for James Franklin to have a big road win. I just don't know that it's ever coming. I thought LSU, like you said, against Florida, bouncing back in the swamp, huge. And I those two teams, Chris, I like LSU a little better, but those aren't your normal LSU and Florida teams. We'll see what LSU does this weekend against Ole Miss, but certainly I haven't bought Florida a lot this year. I think it's going to take them time to recruit back to the level that they're accustomed to. And then Anthony Richardson's hot and cold and all that. And then their defense kind of fell apart against the Tigers. So, we'll see how things shake out ultimately for the Gators. But certainly if you're looking down the schedule, you're kind of looking at the two teams at the end. If you're the Gamecocks going, tremendous challenge. But the next little bit, the next 4 really, I think the Gamecocks could be competitive in all of them.
Yeah, Florida, JC, is kind of meeting what I said about them over the summer, which is I felt like they were the greatest mystery in the SEC East, maybe in the SEC. Just like I still don't really know what to think of Florida, and like looking way too far ahead, obviously, but that matchup in the swamp, it's like I think that's going to be one of those games where you really do just have to wait the week of, and it's like, how has Florida looked recently? How has South Carolina looked recently? And just kind of kind of go from there. But anyways, that will be for down the road. Before we dive into the A&M game this weekend, excuse me, JC, some big news that dropped early in the week, I feel like kind of got brushed under the rug, but RJ Roderick into the transfer portal. Your thoughts on that? I know the safety position was already one that, depth was a bit of a concern. And I know Nick Eamon-Warry had taken over that starting spot, but were you surprised at all to see the veteran defensive back hit the portal?
Yeah, somewhat. Just because he's been here so long, and he left for a little while. When Muschamp first, I guess resigned or was fired or whatever. He wasn't with the team for the rest of that year. The new staff, though, when they came in, they liked him. They thought, here's a kid that's been around a lot, probably just needs a fresh start. I understand he's kind of a punching bag sometimes if the Gamecocks struggle in the secondary. Right. I think more importantly, though, Chris, when you don't have that much eligibility left, and it's looking like you're not going to play a whole lot. I've seen guys do this. I think Otrey Smith did this a couple of years ago, last year actually. Just went in the portal because he knew he wasn't going to get to play a lot, and went from there. So. I think people need to wish him well. I don't know where he'll end up. I kind of feel he's from the low country, maybe a Charleston Southern, maybe a Coastal, someplace like that, to where he can get on the field and finish out what I think will be his 7th season of college football next year. So wow. That's good. But yeah, I think it was just a matter of, and yeah, Carolina does need depth in the secondary, but you look at it, against Kentucky, Eamon-Warry played tremendous like he always does. DQ Smith led the team in tackles, another true freshman. And then they slid David Spalding back there. I thought he had one of his best games up at Kentucky. Kind of came out of nowhere. And then Devontae Reed's back this week. So you have 4 guys back there that you trust and feel comfortable with if you're Torian Gray and Clayton White. So, where does RJ really fit in with that? I don't know, So I think, was it surprising that, a guy that's been around that long bolts in the middle of the year? Yeah, it kind of always is. But when you look at the big picture, I understand completely why he did it. I think it was totally related to the fact that, hey, these young guys have just passed me, and I'm not going to get to play a whole lot.
Yeah. Now, JC, moving in the game this weekend, when you look at this matchup, and we'll dive into the specifics offensively, defensively here in just a second, but I know obviously you can't ignore, and it's interesting, we're having conversations similar, I feel like, to what we had the week of the Kentucky game, because you can't ignore the trends and the history and things that help tell you what may or may not happen on the field of play in this ball game. We all know the history. Texas A&M 8-0 in the series. You've never beaten the Aggies, and a lot of the games have not been close. But you take a look at these two teams, the 2022 version of both these squads. Gamecocks have won 3 in a row. A&M's lost 2 in a row. They've been extremely underwhelming this season. They've got issues at the quarterback position with their starter Max Johnson being out. Not even sure if Haynes King is going to play. You look at them defensively, they can't stop the run, giving up 189 yards per game. I just want to get your overall a heat check on this ball game, because it feels like the stars are sort of aligned. You have momentum, you're hot, you're playing a very gettable A&M team, you got them at home at night. It feels like everything's lined up, and really the only thing going against you is that negative history. I know Texas A&M is talented. Obviously they are. You look at what they did at Alabama, but don't you feel like, JC, without a doubt, in the 9-year history of the series, this is South Carolina's best chance to get the Aggies?
Oh yeah, and I thought that at the beginning of the year, Chris. I thought that a lot of the hype around A&M was based on a historically great recruiting class on paper, and you kind of look at that class. It's very D-line heavy. We know those guys sometimes take time, just because you're a 5-star, so Dexter Lawrence for Clemson. That guy can step in and play, right? Not everybody can, right away. No matter how much upside you have as a 5-star player. Zach Pickens is an example. He was not a superstar overnight. Not many are. So I sort of looked at their personnel losses from last season, and I was like, whoa, they're going to be very young in some spots. And then the injury bug has hit them pretty bad this year. We had Jeff Tarpley from Gig'em 24/7 on our show earlier this week, and he framed it in terms of injuries, and we've all experienced that around here, and we know how that is. When you're kind of missing 4 or 5 key guys, when you're continuously having a revolving door at quarterback or on the offensive line, that time it just hasn't. From that standpoint, has not been a good year for Jimbo Fisher. But absolutely, I mean, these teams. You could realistically say, I mean, I think it's safe to say A&M is probably more battle tested because, their non-conference games were Miami and App State. Obviously, that's a little bit tougher than maybe SC State and Charlotte, but same kind of deal, not a very high scoring offense on either side. Opportunistic defense, but that struggles against the run at times on both sides. They're kind of mirror images in a lot of ways. And I think with the Gamecocks being at home Saturday night, I think the game's probably going to come down to turnovers and things like that. Because that's the one thing when A&M has played well and, the close loss at Bama, the win over Arkansas, big win against Miami back in week 3, they've gotten turnovers. Alabama turned it over 4 times against the Aggies, missed 2 field goals and had a crazy day penalty-wise in that one too. And that's why A&M was at the 1-yard line at the end with a chance to win. Bama just couldn't put them away. Does that mean more about Alabama or does that mean more about A&M? I don't know, that kind of thing. But when I look at the results, the personnel, all that, there's no doubt A&M's talented. No doubt they've got players. But, it's a team playing a team, not a recruiting ranking playing a recruiting ranking. And I think that makes for a pretty even matchup Saturday night with Carolina's crowd. And if they can get some explosive plays and things like they did against Kentucky and run the ball, I think they have a great shot at winning.
Yeah, JC, as I mentioned, we'll start first with A&M's defense and what the Gamecocks will probably try to do, in my opinion, against that attack. 189 yards per game is what A&M is giving up. You look in their pass defense, sort of like the Gamecocks, like you mentioned. I do agree with you, by the way. Side note, these two teams mirror images, and it's weird how similarly I feel right now as I felt. I talked about this morning, but going into this game as I felt going into Kentucky, where it's like I look at the game and the individual matchup, a lot of reasons to be positive, a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I think it's more so the trends and the history that make me feel pessimistic versus any specific matchup or a daunting opponent, right? Like when you play Georgia, there's reason to be concerned. You play games like this, and I'm not trying to, obviously write off A&M or not show respect to the opponent, but, you feel a little bit better, right? But you look at A&M giving 175 yards per game through the air, but 189.8 yards per game on the ground. I would imagine, JC, that leads to a heavy, heavy dosage of Marshawn Lloyd, the rushing attack. Obviously, you need Spencer Rattler to play well and do a much better job of protecting the football. But I'd imagine, JC, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're going to see Marshawn Lloyd early and often in this ballgame.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carolina it would not be wise to not at least try to line up.
Right.
And I like what they're doing and some of the things they've done to try to get the run game going. That power formation they have when you had, Nate Atkins out there playing and blocking, kind of as I guess they call him the sniffer. When you put the guy, the fullback H-back tight end guy in motion. Wyatt Campbell's done some good things. I think Ja'Kai Moore is playing his best football at South Carolina. And sometimes, obviously Carolina struggled up front the first couple of games of the season, first few games of the season. But sometimes it takes a little while for an O-line to gel. We've seen it around here before where the O-line at the beginning of the year looks nothing like the group that finished the season. Several times during the Spurrier era that happened. And so I think with the line playing well, they've sort of found something with Lloyd and some of those power runs. I can see the Gamecocks at least, not only trying to do it Saturday night and getting that part established, but being successful. And we know through 19 games of the Beamer era here that when on offense, when South Carolina can run the football, their offense tends to be pretty good. I mean, when they can't, it's a different story. It's ugly, but we'll see. And I'm not saying Rattler doesn't need to complete some passes and they don't need explosive plays in the passing game and things like that. But I think it all kind of feeds, one feeds the other. You're able to run it. They can't just sit there and load it up on you. and all that. And, then they got to creep up and try to stop it. So, then you can go over the top or, maybe get one of those little screens and block it like you did against Kentucky. And, I think that could be 6, depending on who's out there and gets it. So I think that, you still look for balance and all, but yeah, with the way A&M struggled against the run, I think you'd be kind of dumb not to line up and try to get that going.
JC, you mentioned the Beamer era, and South Carolina is 5-0 when they've got extra time to get ready, whether that be a bye week, whether that be the offseason going into a season opener, whether that be a game like SC State where you did have extra time to prepare. But they're 5-0 with extra time to get ready, and the offense has been dazzling in more than a couple of those games. Could you see South Carolina potentially dialing up some things or doing some things that we haven't seen to this point? Because, I think back to last year, and, you mentioned obviously it was spurned by the running game being fantastic when you talk about the Florida game last year where you came off the bye week. I mean, I think you ran for like 280 yards in that ball game. But could you see a similar result where bye week sat prevails yet again and we see an offensive explosion, if you will?
Possibly. If Carolina gets it going, running the ball, it's going to be hard for A&M to get stops. The thing with their defense, though, the Aggies, is their run defense is not that great. Pass defense numbers are good, but they don't give up a lot of points. They're kind of a resilient group, especially in the red zone. So, you hope Carolina, and it's maybe a game. I don't think they're going to have as many chances to score as they had against Florida that night. But if you think about that game too, Carolina had to kick 4 field goals against the Gators, even though they won 40-17. So, you're kind of hopeful that you can get touchdowns in the red zone against this team, because I also think as limited as this A&M offense has proven to be this year, and even with A-Chain, they're not a team that's going to go in and score 40. Most against most legit defenses. But I think if Carolina can put points on the board and can get it done, running the ball and passing it and all that and get the crowd going, that, you could see a situation if you get up enough early that A&M is just not going to be equipped to make a big comeback. So once again, the need for an early start kind of rears its ugly head for the Gamecocks on Saturday night.
Well, and that's what's funny you say that, JC, is both these teams start very slowly. That's putting it kindly.
So, it's a punt fest most of the time.
I mean, JC, I tell you, we always do like the best bet for the games or whatever, and I've gone on the under, but I tell you, the under first half, under 23, that feels like free money, man. Until we see otherwise, and either one of these teams is going to get off the schneid quickly and get it going. But, I wanted to point out, too, you mentioned the Florida game, and we're coming off of Kentucky. And in those ball games, big plays on defense, defensive touchdowns, and big plays on special teams, block punts, what have you, huge difference makers in those ball games. You think back to Florida last year, you had the scoop and score by Jabari Ellis. That was kind of the nail in the coffin, I feel like, early in that one. So, I think if you're able, certainly, it's cliche, no doubt, but if you're able to force some type of defensive score or special team score, especially at home, you love your chances. Now talking about the other side of the ball, JC, you mentioned again, these teams kind of mirror images of each other. I expect A&M to also lean on their running game. And it's a pretty good idea to do so when you got a guy like A-Chain in the backfield. We talked about him this morning, really explosive player, can take it to the house at any point. And especially when you look at the questions they have at the quarterback position, I'll ask you, are you hearing anything specifically on Haynes King, his status? I know you said an Aggie insider, I believe, yesterday. Do they have a feel? Is it going to be a game time decision? And let me ask you this, do you think it makes much of a difference who starts at quarterback for A&M in regards to what they're going to try to do?
I think if we were talking about Max Johnson or Haynes King, it's probably one thing. I think with King and Weigman, they're kind of similar guys. They both have some wheels. They can, I think one key for Carolina defensively is don't let Haynes King beat you with his legs, because, he's not proven to be the most accurate passer in the world, especially when he's under pressure. But as we all know, those guys can kind of run out and get yards. Same with Weigman, but as far as like the word on the quarterback situation, you talk You talk to their insider, Jeff Tarpley, and he's really good at what he does. And how he phrased it to us, Chris, was Jimbo didn't say Haynes was starting. He said he's going. So we got a little coach speak going on there.
Yeah.
And sort of the discussion on Gig'em 24/7 and other Aggie outlets I've been reading this week is like, well, if they go with Weigman, they're just basically mailing it in on this season because he's not ready, and kind of trying to build for the future, get him experience, whatever. I know Jimbo likes him a lot. He talked about him like he was going to win the Super Bowl, Heisman Trophy, and NFL MVP all at the same time when he signed it. But just like South Carolina, Jimbo's offense is quote unquote pro style in nature, but it's more complex. So it does take quarterbacks some time to get it. But I think, if you're wanting to face one of the two, obviously when you hear 5 stars and at South Carolina, you've seen freshman quarterbacks come in through the years and turn your season around. You're kind of like, oh, I hope that doesn't happen. But there's a reason he was third team. There's a reason he wasn't ready to go out there yet. I don't think it was coaching malpractice to not start him like it may have been when they didn't put Jake Bentley out there from the start in 2016 at Carolina, or Tannehill out there for the start in 92. So we'll see what happens. But I think those two are very similar in that they can run, they can throw, obviously. If you ask me which one I would rather the Gamecocks face, I don't know. I think maybe you take your chances with King better because he is a little banged up and he hasn't. He was a 5-star too, but he's just not played all that well. There's a track record this year of him sort of struggling, putting the ball in jeopardy, that kind of thing. So, and then the other one's an unknown. And that kid will be out there just playing on pure emotion, and sometimes that's dangerous. So I'd probably lean toward King and all that, but something tells me that just like in a lot of situations this year with coaches and injuries, that we're not getting the complete story at this point. And, so we'll see who trots out there for A&M on Saturday night.
JC, I understand this fan base and those who follow this team, this program closely, being hesitant to buy into any sort of hype, especially with the way this season started. And I feel like there was a lot of hype generated in preseason, and, has this team through 6 games, even though the record's where you want it to be, have they met it in regards to their play on the field? That's debatable. And I know that Texas A&M, a lot of talent, 5 stars everywhere. You look at the recruiting class they just hauled in. They've got ball players like you mentioned. But I can't help but look at this game. You're on a 3-game winning streak. They're on a 2-game losing streak. A&M's probably been more underwhelming than you have, especially when you look at expectations. There's no doubt they've been more underwhelming, right? This is a team, preseason ranked top 10. Everybody thought, oh, they're a playoff team. Heck, I picked them to go 10-2 in the preseason, so I look like an idiot. You factor that in. You factor in all the momentum. You factor in you've got them at night, at home. JC, am I crazy for saying, I just feel like this is a game you should expect to win? Carolina should expect. I understand, again, from the fan perspective. I will not blame anyone for coming into this game with conservative expectations, because it's a team you've never beaten, and this fan base has been in this position before where, we're going to show up. It's going to be a sellout. We're all hyped for a night game, and we've seen the Gamecocks fall flat on their face. Just call it for what it is. But if you're able to remove the past and the history and the trends and just look at this game for what it is, again, JC, I just can't help coming back to literally everything you could ask for to be lined up is lined up for you. Now it's just time to show up and deliver. Your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think it lines up well. I think that, it sort of has been all year. Once I saw what App State did to them, I was like, well, this team's got serious problems. And, frankly, I think it's been pretty good coaching that they've won the games they've won. They could easily be 1-5 right now coming in here. But I'm with it. I'm with people there. I think kind of just like a Kentucky game, Chris. A lot of people were doubtful about that game.
Guilty.
But and look, I also understand totally where you were coming from, and I do this too. I think I got a little sure of myself, because I was going and all that. But you have to predict based on what you've seen, not necessarily a projection or something like that. So I got that, but there were people saying uh, believing Kentucky was getting in the Wildcat, and I mean they don't run Wildcat anymore up there, and just going to run all over Carolina and all that good stuff, and kind of like what happened to Mississippi State against Kentucky this past weekend. But the Gamecocks came through, and so I think in similar fashion, when you look at it, you always want to look for what's a favorable matchup. Sometimes there are none. Against Georgia, there was not a single favorable matchup for South Carolina. Very few against Arkansas as well, based on how Arkansas was playing at the time. But, Kentucky, it's like, well, I think Carolina's defensive line can play well. I think, that helps the secondary when you're getting pressure as far as turnovers and stuff. I think Carolina will be able to run the ball, that kind of thing. And, you kind of look at this game with the Aggies, Chris, and you see some similar types of matchups that the Gamecocks can take advantage of. And plus, they're at home. Shane Beamer's 6-2 in home night games. Obviously, the Clemson game last year was a severe disappointment, and that was a bad loss. But the Kentucky loss last season, I think anybody would tell you that they sort of felt like they let that one get away. So Beamer at home at night. They haven't always played greatest competition at night at home, but it's been a little bit different than the Muschamp era, where I think Carolina was 2-7 at home at night under Will. And I have some theories about that, but that's the night game success has kind of flipped the last couple of years since Beamer's been there.
Well, JC, heck, man, I'll put you on the spot again. You willing to take a jab at Carolina A&M? I mean, again, I'm not trying to lure you into one way or the other. I know hopefully I gave you some good coach speak there, make you want to run through a brick wall. And I'll drop mine tomorrow, of course. And I think I kind of fooled the audience Kentucky week, because I was very optimistic, admittedly, and then chose the Wildcats, and thank God I was wrong. But, you nailed the Kentucky game. What are you feeling going into Saturday?
I feel confident. Probably not as confident, just because, people are right when they talk about, overall talent that A&M has. They have some individuals that scare you. They have more individuals that scare you than Kentucky did. And Kentucky did have some scary players. Rodriguez, obviously. You got the receivers and all that. But I think I think Carolina's going to win. I think that they'll A&M will make some plays, but the Gamecocks will make some plays. They'll be able to run the ball. I think they'll win 28-19 is my prediction. And I'll give that also tomorrow on my show and the website and everywhere else. But I'm going to lock that one in with you right now, Chris. 28-19 Gamecocks.
JC, I appreciate you dropping it early for the people, man. That's incredible.
I love the people, man. That's what it's all about, right?
Hey, we do it for the people. We
do it for the people. That's why I have a blast doing all this, man, because it's for the people.
Yeah, absolutely. JC, last thing before I get you out of here, of course, again, I got to ask you about the recruiting side of things. Anything notable? Anything standing out? I know we're slowly getting closer, right? We're all locked into the season and week by week, but signing day is approaching. I know things are probably kind of heating up on the recruiting side. So anything you're hearing, is there anything of note that Gamecock fans should know or be keeping up with?
Yeah, Marquis Anderson and his family will be back in town this weekend. A lot of 2024 kids, Pringle and Thompson, the tackles from within the state, are among the unofficial visitors. As far as official visitors and potential next commits in this class, next weekend, Elijah Davis, I think he'll be a 4-star JUCO player. I mean, Alabama and everybody else has offered him, but originally from Wagner Sally, he's at East Mississippi Community College in Scuba, Mississippi. Now, this is his official visit to South Carolina this weekend. I think he can be really, really good, Chris. He was really good coming out of high school, just didn't have grades, and was a kind of a bigger end. And now he's a 300-pound tackle, really good film. Like I said, Alabama and everybody else wants him. You could never have too many big guys on the D line, and you got to replace Zach Pickens next year, probably with the way he's playing anyway. So I think that's the next. If you're kind of looking for somebody on commit watch for this class, keep an eye on Elijah Davis, in-state Palmetto State product, but out in Scuba, Mississippi, at East Mississippi, visiting next weekend for the Missouri game.
JC, and it's crazy to think, man, last thing, that if South Carolina can find a way to win this game Saturday, you are realistically staring at a 7-2 start. And I tell you what, I don't care how it looks, what the stats say, There's not a fan out there that wouldn't have signed up for a 7-2. But you got to win this one first. But it's just crazy to even be having that conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
You just never know. College football, you never know. You never know.
Like it's teams change week to week. That's why you don't panic and you just kind of move forward. And you had a bad game against Georgia. To heck with it. That's over. That game's ancient history, and you just keep moving. And you hope that you're one of these teams that gets better as the year goes on, and not one of these teams that kind of gets worse. Because there are some teams out there like that. A lot has to do with injuries and things like that, obviously. But it's a long season, and certainly if they get to 7-2, Chris, Beamer will be he will be a win away from tying Will Muschamp, Joe Morrison, and Steve Spurrier for the most wins in program history the first 2 years. I think he's got a shot if he gets there to break it. Because if he can go beat Florida, and maybe you pull an upset against the orange teams at the end, maybe you don't, but then you win a bowl game, you're sitting at 16 victories. If you win 9 and go 9-4 first 2 seasons, that's that top Muschamp's record he always talks about. So that's always a good start, especially considering Shane Beamer's a young coach. It's his first head coaching job, that kind of thing. So something to kind of look out for there in the future if they do keep winning.
Yeah. Hey, listen, we saw last year South Carolina had a second half surge in their season, so maybe it happens again. You never know. JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur Inside the Gamecocks joins us every single Thursday. JC, I appreciate you taking the time, man. Looking forward to doing it again next week, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks to everybody out there, and we'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Take care.